T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.
Hey y'all, welcome to another top 5 episode of Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet. Per usual, my name is Stephanie Hardy and I am a co-host here on Women's Wrestling Talk. I'm so happy to be a part of this team of female Avengers here. And I am also a host and creator of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. But in this capacity today, I will be hosting this top 5 moments for this Women's History Month that we're going to be doing all month long. And we're going to be talking about the best women who have done amazing things, in terms of the world of professional wrestling. And what better way to start in this top 5 without talking about one of the most history-making and trailblazing women in terms of the Divas Now women's division, AJ Lee, who is a 2 or 3-time Divas champion and a multiple-time Slammy Award winner. And this article was written by our very own Sammy. He put his all into this top 5, and I'm going to do my level best to cover it as best as I can, because AJ Lee was definitely one of my few favorites. It was like 1 minute always. For me as a fan, I always sort of believed in AJ Lee in the sense that she always, was like the underdog queen, right? Like she was always the one that you would want to root for because she was just so different. And she got her start on the first version or the first iteration of NXT, which was a competition, sort of reality, not a reality show, but sort of a competition, fun little show that they would do on certain nights on the WGN network. And a lot of people were rooting for her, even though she didn't go on to win that season. I believe she went on and became a part of the Chick Busters tag team and then made even more history after that as a singles competitor. But guess what? We're going to get into this top 5, and I'm so happy that to see her, blossom and succeed the way that she has in wrestling and even outside of wrestling as well. So as we get into this top 5, our number 5 moment comes from WrestleMania 30. Now, we all know that WrestleMania 30 turned out to be a huge party and a huge, coronation of Daniel Bryan and his championship, right? And it was just a huge moment for all of us as a whole, which was something that all of us fans occupied for. But there was a lot of history, and also in terms of The Undertaker losing his undefeated streak, right? Like everybody remembers that. But with this WrestleMania, there was also another history-making moment. It was the first time the Divas Championship was ever defended at a WrestleMania, and this match was created and crafted by Vicky Guerrero, of course, the wife of the late great Eddie Guerrero, who was serving as an authority figure at the time, and she created the Vicky Guerrero Divas Championship Invitational. And as you can see, this was a who's who at the time. This was around the time that AJ Lee felt like the entire women's division was really nothing more than just a joke and full of women who just wanted to be celebrities, as in, something that she said in this really infamous pipe bomb that she gave. So Vicky Guerrero wanted to give all the girls a chance, to get this title at WrestleMania on this huge platform. And so the Invitational was created. So, of course, you have a who's who of, WWE women back in the day, of the divas back then. You have the Bella twins, you have Emma, you even have Eva Marie, Rosa Mendez, Oksana, Alicia Fox, Summer Rae, Layla L, and the Funkadactyls, and even Tamina and Natty. Like, basically a who's who of women's wrestlers back then were all in this match. And as you can see here, they were ganging up on AJ. Like, everybody, in the women's locker room were just upset at the idea that she looked down on all of them and basically accused them of being hyper focused on their careers. In terms of their reality show like Total Divas and later on Total Bellas, right? So they wanted to prove her wrong. And I remember watching this match and feeling like, man, like, I know watching this match back then when it first happened, I was really rooting for Naomi. Here at Women's Wrestling Talk, we ride for Naomi. But back then, of course, before, I was riding for Naomi with my Women's Wrestling Talk sisters, I was rooting for Naomi to win because I felt like she deserved to be a champion at some point, or maybe even, Cameron. But as it turns out, even with all of the jumping and stuff that the Bella twins were doing on everyone, it was all like a really crazy time with all the athleticism and stuff. AJ Lee wound up victorious and wound up retaining her Divas title after giving the Black Widow to Naomi, and it was too much for her and she tapped out, much to the chagrin of Vicky Guerrero there watching in disgust. And I think this is pretty, this is like a nice view of the times in which we were in. Like, Vicky Guerrero always had a beef with AJ Lee, especially when it came to Dolph Ziggler and that little, entanglement that Dolph Ziggler had with Vicky Guerrero, and then him dumping her for AJ Lee. So, that was really a fun time back then, and it was just absolutely crazy. But AJ Lee wound up victorious. But we're going to get a little bit into what happened the night after that WrestleMania a little bit later. So that's our number 5 moment, the Vicky Guerrero Divas Championship Invitational, in which AJ Lee retained the title. Now, our number 4 moment, which I think is a very solid number 4, is the match at Payback 2013 with Caitlyn, who was AJ's former best friend, and AJ fighting for the Divas title in 2013. Now, I remember this story. This was such a hype story for me because even though I love wrestling and I love the athleticism, I also live for the drama of the stories. And in this story, you kind of saw AJ and Caitlyn sort of growing apart because when they first debuted on television on SmackDown and on Raw, they were a part of the tag team called the Chick Busters. And a lot of the time they would fight against already established tag teams like Natalya and Beth Phoenix and other women, of course, but they would always lose. And a part of me wondered, when is this team going to get it together? But you can see that they were really close and they really loved each other, right? So around the time AJ Lee, started acting a little bit unhinged and I guess one would say boy crazy, that was where her and Caitlyn started falling apart. But there was a little bit more of an underlying story going on there with AJ Lee being aligned with Big E. And she was using Big E after they had broken away from Dolph Ziggler to sort of get in Caitlyn's head and pose as a secret admirer. And when he revealed himself to be the secret admirer, he actually pretended like he was really in love with Caitlyn when really he dropped her on her behind in the middle of the ring on an episode of Raw and showed that his allegiance was with AJ and proved and basically hurt Caitlyn's feelings and used that to get in her head to lead up to this match at Payback in 2013. So the drama was crazy, right? And Caitlyn was really there, and this, led to the end of their friendship naturally. So in this picture, you see Caitlyn was more of a power girl. If you've ever seen any pictures of her on Instagram, you've seen her lifting weights and all of her muscles. Caitlyn was one of the rare, power girls, in the divas division back then. She even called herself the hybrid diva, which I loved because you can see that she was gorgeous, but she was also a strong girl as well. And this is her lifting AJ during their match. And this is also her grabbing AJ by her hair and, just getting ready to give AJ the business, right? And then you can see the referee kind of looking back in horror, like, oh my God, like she's really about to get her, right? But during this match, it was just really hard because you could see that Caitlyn really didn't want to do that to her best friend, but she had to in order to try to keep her title, right? And in the end, what wound up being Caitlyn's downfall was the Black Widow submission, which was something that AJ will go on to use in her arsenal, for the rest of her career. This was an octopus hold. And I know this was my first time seeing this type of move, but I was just like, oh my God, like what is she doing to her? And there was a couple of times where Caitlyn tried to fight out of it, but it didn't work. And she just couldn't help but just start crying, and she fell down to her knees and she tapped out, leading to AJ winning her very first championship in WWE. And as you can see, AJ was visibly emotional after winning this title, and it really meant a lot to her because in her life she had always dreamed of being a WWE superstar. Like, she cried when she met Lita. I'm pretty sure all of us wrestling fans have seen that picture where she asked Lita to sign a videotape that she had of hers, and she cried and burst into tears, and they hugged each other and embraced each other. And at this point, AJ really felt that she had reached a pinnacle of her wrestling dreams, and she won her first women's title, and it meant so much to her that she got the date that she won the title tattooed on the back of her neck. And you could tell that this really meant a lot to her. So this was a beautiful moment for AJ, and it was a great showing for Caitlyn as well. And they will go on to feud a little bit more, but this was definitely AJ's moment right here that she had earned, that was well earned as well, because she really just wanted to show that she was worthy enough to be champion, even if it took underhanded tactics to do it. Ooh, AJ was just so mean sometimes, but it's okay. Our number our number 3 moment comes in the form of AJ's rivalry with Paige, who is also a trailblazer in the women's division as well. And this specifically the one I know they fought a lot of different times, but this time on our top 5 list, shout out to Sammy, he put a spotlight on their match at SummerSlam. Now, of course, this feud started when Paige made her debut the night after WrestleMania 30. And AJ was talking about how she was the women's division and how nobody could beat her, right? And she was standing in the middle of the ring with Tamina, who was posing as her bodyguard at the time, and saying that nobody could beat her, right? So Paige came out and actually congratulated her for winning the night before, and AJ didn't take kindly to it. And she basically told Paige, that she should run back to NXT because nobody likes being interrupted. And so this led to a slap fest between the two, and AJ decided to put her Divas title on the line. And as she thought that she had the advantage with the Black Widow submission, Paige broke out of it and hit her with a rampage in order to win her first Divas title. And at the time, Paige was a double champion because she was still the NXT Women's Champion. And so she basically was holding 2 titles at the same time. And she had to give up the NXT Women's Championship, of course, for the girls down there, and still be on the main roster as a Divas Champion. And there was a few months where AJ was gone, but then she won the title back, in a surprise defense on a Raw, which led to them having a beef where they kind of tossed the title back and forth. But at this match here at SummerSlam, this was one of the best matches that they had, because a lot of them were either kind of short or, kind of one and done, because of course at the time, WWE wouldn't give a lot of time to their women's superstars, really, no matter how good they were in the ring, which was kind of sad when you think back on it. But of course, times have evolved since then. And you see here, Paige was trying to get the upper hand on AJ and choke her out and everything, because the thing was, Paige was just tried to show that she was just as unhinged as AJ Lee was in terms of her craziness as well, even though she was still very much new. And they also had a love-hate relationship with each other. And also in this picture, you see Paige going so crazy as if to basically um some hair out of AJ's head, which I think is just, oh my god, I feel like that's the most savage thing you can do during a fight, is to grab the hair and just snatch some out, like basically you're being snatched bald, right? So this match was really good and it was really hard hitting. They hit each other with the best that they had, and ultimately Paige wound up not retaining, but winning the Divas Championship back from AJ. But then, in a weird sort of way, she grabbed her and started hugging her because, like I said, during this feud, they had a love hate relationship. It was like 1 minute they were saying they were best friends, another minute they said they were enemies, so it was like a back and forth love hate situation. And this was sort of this wasn't the end of their feud, but basically this was one of their better matches here. And I'm so glad that Sammy actually chose this one because it was just really good. So yeah, this wasn't one of AJ's best, most victorious moments, but it was still a good match nonetheless. Now, number two, which is a really good number two, really solid number two, is AJ Lee versus Natalya at TLC 2013. Now, of course, since this was in 2013, this was around the time where the women would have a match on the card, but not necessarily an extreme match involving tables, ladders, and chairs. But, the match was still good all the same. And Natalya was really looking to prove herself because this was her first Divas Championship match in 3 years. And she was determined to dethrone AJ at this point, like everybody was. But, this was actually one of the better defenses that AJ had here because, of course, it's known that in the women's locker room, you haven't proved yourself to be the very best if you haven't gone through Natalya. And Natalya is, of course, one of the pillars of women's wrestling, seeing as she was one of the last people to come out of the dungeon. And she is a part of the Hart family dynasty in that way. So it's just, she was looking to win a title, finally, and to win it off of AJ. And Natalya was very aggressive in this match. And she rammed AJ into the barricade a couple of times. And then they would counter each other with each of their holds. And this was a submission fest. You absolutely know that this had to be a submission fest if it was between AJ Lee and Natalya. And I know Natalya definitely came out of the woodworks with so many various submissions, including Boston Crabs and sharpshooters and so many different things. But ultimately, AJ Lee won this match, and this is AJ actually hitting Natalya with a kick, from the corner of the ring, which is one of her signature moves. And this is Natalya getting ready to slam AJ over her shoulder. This was one of the best matches that we had seen Natalya fight against someone like AJ Lee. And it was a pretty full circle moment because it's like I said earlier, when AJ Lee started with Caitlyn as a part of the Chick Busters. It's like it almost felt like Natalya and Beth Phoenix were always bending them like pretzels and making them lose over and over again. And someone small like AJ was always getting bullied by someone like Natalya. So to see AJ Lee come out with the win in this match, and beating someone who actually used to always have the upper hand over her was like a really good full circle moment. And AJ Lee wound up winning this match with a roll up, but when you win, you win, and that's really all that matters. So I feel that that's a pretty solid number two, but I know if it was me and if I made a number two, it would be AJ's pipe bomb moment. But at the same time, if you're talking about mic skills, that might be a completely different list or a completely different story. As a matter of fact, that is a list that we do have on Women's Wrestling Talk, on www.talkpod.com, where we talk about the women and everything, and some of the things that some of the women may have said on the microphone on during different promotions. So please check that article out on www.talkpod.com. But number one is a really solid and really good and heartfelt number one. And this was AJ's final match where she tagged with Paige, who, of course, was her longtime rival and best friend, and Naomi versus Natalya and the Bella Twins. Now, the night before, I believe this was the night before was a WrestleMania, and she was tagging with Paige in order to fight the Bella Twins, because Paige always had an ongoing rivalry with the Bella Twins. So this match was after Sammy has popped in on the chat. Shout out to him who wrote the article. He said, "I had trouble with this number one, Stephanie." Oh, okay. Well, not counting down stuff is a struggle, so I know how you feel, Sammy. I definitely know how you feel. But yeah, like, this number one was really solid, and like I was saying, Paige had an ongoing rivalry with the Bella Twins, and it seemed that at times that she was always fighting the Bella Twins by herself. So everybody was wondering, like, who could her mystery partner be in this tag team match at WrestleMania, and it turned out to be AJ Lee, and she fought with her and stuff. So the night afterward, um they also fought in a 3-woman tag match, like I said, with Naomi and Paige versus Natalya and the Bella Twins. And oh my gosh, this match was really good. You had Naomi sort of definitely showing the best of what she had to offer. You had AJ getting frustrated with the Bellas and all of the underhanded tactics that they were using, that they loved to use at the time. And then you kind of just sort of saw, like, AJ and Paige sort of looking unbothered at them, but then kind of just getting sick of them at the same time. And I do believe that Naomi and Paige wound up winning the match, as Naomi ended the match with the rear view finisher, and everybody enjoyed this match. It was a really happy moment for AJ and Paige and Naomi, and something something that I really appreciated about this match was just the fact that AJ even had on a t-shirt that said "I'm a hugger," which sort of speaks to, her love for Bailey, who at the time was being the hugger, giving the hugger gimmick and stuff like that. So it was good that she did that, as a sign of good faith as to, Bailey being the future, a part of the future of women's wrestling at that time, because nobody knew that AJ was getting ready to leave. And that next day, she released a statement on Twitter and on Instagram saying that she was hanging up her Chuck Taylors and retiring from in-ring work. And this broke my heart. I did not want her to leave. Like, I really just wanted her to stay and just continue to have all these amazing fights, because I literally believe, and I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in this, I really believe that AJ Lee was a woman who was far ahead of her time when it comes to wrestling. I really feel like she's definitely one of the pillars of women's wrestling being where it is today. And if she had stayed, like, could you imagine a rivalry with her and Sasha Banks, or a rivalry with her and Charlotte, or a rivalry with her and Alexa Bliss, and all the mind games they would have played with each other? Like, that would have been absolutely sick. But the thing is, when your body just can't take it anymore, and then there's lots of other personal stuff going around in your life, because of course she is married to CM Punk, and we all know the stories that, happen with that. There's so much going on, and you just feel like, maybe you've done everything that you can, and you've made all your dreams come true. And that's something that she always says, is the fact that and even in her book, she said that she felt like she had done everything she could possibly do in the WWE. So she felt like, she had reached the end of her time, and she stopped and she retired. And what a career she had even at the time, when women's wrestling wasn't being taken as seriously, and it seemed like the longest times they would be on television would be for Total Divas, and you knew that that was what was going on. But AJ kind of lit a fire under the women's division and let these girls know, like, no, like, you need to be here to fight for this title and show me that you're the best, so I can prove to you that you're not. So basically, AJ was far ahead of her time, and I really was sad when she did retire. But knowing that she retired on a high note with that last match with Paige and Naomi, whom she had a rivalry with, and then Naomi, who she was on NXT with, when they were on NXT, the game show together. Like, it was a full circle moment, and it was beautiful that that was how it ended. But that's not the complete end of AJ Lee's story. Because, of course, she is, a best selling author. She is a New York Times bestseller, with her book called Crazy is My Superpower, which is a book that I am happy to have read and owned. And it is her autobiography, and I suggested you do read it if you already haven't. It is really good cover to cover. I read it in a matter of, I believe, a week. So please, if you haven't had the chance to read her autobiography, please do. It is so, so good. Like, buy it, like, borrow it from a friend. I would say borrow it from me, but some of y'all might not even be close to me. But either way, get this book if you can, because it is really good. She's a best-selling author. She also is a great advocate for mental health. She's been on multiple panels and multiple videos talking about, ending the stigma of talking about mental health. Because she has been open about her struggles with her bipolar disorder. And that's something that really does free a lot of people. When you see people talking about issues that you kind of struggle with, and you're not necessarily open to talk about, when you see someone else, with a larger platform talking about it, maybe someone sees that and they feel like, okay, well, if she's dealing with it and if she's coping with it as best as she can, then maybe I can as well. So she's freeing a lot of people in that with her mental health work. She's also a co-author of a comic book, which is basically Glow, which was based off of the series on Netflix, and they made a comic book for it. And she was a co-author of Glow versus the Babyface. And she's also been an avid lover of comics and video games, because while she was with WWE, she was known as the nerd girl, or the girl who was just into, like, Converse, and into, all the nerd stuff. And that made a lot of other people feel seen as well, because usually, when you're a nerd in that way, you feel like, oh, well, people are making fun of you and they make it seem like, oh, that's not cool and all this other stuff. But she showed a lot of people that being a girl and being into different things like wrestling and comic books and all the different things and video games, which she was into a lot of the time, that was cool as well. So she was really freeing a lot of people by being who she was. And also, she is also now a color commentator for the revamped WOW Women of Wrestling series on, I believe, CBS or Paramount Plus. So yeah, she's a color commentator for that show, and it's really great to see her getting involved in wrestling again. Even if she isn't in action, because she's been inactive for a number of years, or about 8 years now. Um she's still active in the sense that her voice will always be heard, and she will always thrive in wrestling in various ways, and her voice will always be valued, and her advice will be valued as well, so as she continues to lay the foundation for the future of women's wrestling. So I am so glad to have done this top 5, which was written by our boy Sammy, who is also in the comments, and he was saying how he had trouble choosing, the number one. He said he was debating whether or not AJ Lee versus Paige versus Nikki Bella at Night of Champions in 2015. I remember that match. That was a good match. And he also said that AJ has a lot of moments, in all caps, which I totally get. There are so many moments, and it's just, it's just really, really, insane how many moments that she has. But when you do these top fives, it's kind of hard to choose. But once you do choose, you stand on it and, you put it out there in the universe. But of course, you Women's Wrestling Talk faithful, what are some of your top 5 or top 10 or top 20, maybe, I don't know, favorite AJ Lee moments? Of course, you can go on our articles and comment on them. You can share the articles on www.talkpod.com, or you can comment under the post that's been made about this top 5 show and talk about what your favorite AJ Lee moments were or are or whatever. We are, willing to hear from you and hear, our fans, and hear, all of what you guys have to say. So please be active and get active in those comments if you want to let us know what your favorite AJ Lee moments were. So with that in mind, I'm so happy to have done this top 5. So please know that you can follow us. You can follow me, first of all, Stephanie Hardy at Queen Steph Hardy on Instagram and Twitter. And please know that you can follow Women's Wrestling Talk on Instagram and Twitter at WW Talk Pod. And you can follow our website, which is www.talkpod.com, and look up our latest articles. Even I have an article about Stephanie McMahon and the top 5 Stephanie McMahon moments. So please check that out if you already haven't. That debuted this weekend. I'm so proud to have written it. So please, read it and be gentle. But yeah, please read that and read and listen to Women's Wrestling Talk everywhere you get your podcasts and watch us on YouTube, and just continue to support the Women's Wrestling Talk movement, because we are the Avengers of female wrestling media, and what we do is important. So I'm so happy to be a part of it, and I'm so glad. Oh no, we have one more moment. Okay. Amazing Tribe in the comments said that Naomi versus AJ Lee for the Divas Championship moments, any wrestling match with the Goddess of Glow, Naomi. Yep, I understand. We ride for Naomi here. But like I was saying, just check out our website and check out everything that we've got going on. There's another top 5 taking place today at 5:00, I believe, Central Time. So please check that out. So with that in mind, and also you can live tweet with us for Raw. Now, I'm not doing it, but someone else, I believe, is doing it. So please check that out as well. So with that in mind, this has been Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet. And until next time, bye, y'all. Okay. I had a technical issue. I had a technical issue. I was trying to do that. Oh man, I'm sorry, guys.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling show on the planet.